Hey guys, picture this. Egypt, 1903. Archaeologists break into a tomb that's been sealed for 3,000 years, but when they get inside, it's completely trashed. Stripped bare. Someone got there first, way first, and scattered across the floor are fragments of inscriptions that shouldn't exist. Evidence of a pharaoh who ruled for 22 years, but whose name was systematically erased from history. Tonight, we're going to piece together one of archaeology's greatest mysteries, the woman who dared to become king. Before we dive into ancient Egypt, get comfortable, dim the lights, let your mind settle into that space where history comes alive. If you're enjoying these stories, hit subscribe, it really helps the channel grow, and I love hearing from you guys. Drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from, and what time it is. Are you in New York at midnight? London at 5 AM? I read every single one. Okay, let's travel back to that moonlit night in the Valley of the Kings. Chapter 1. The Silent Echoes of a Hidden Tomb. December 1903. Valley of the Kings. The full moon hangs over limestone cliffs like a pale eye watching. Theodore Davis and his team have been digging for months, tomb after tomb, some intact, some robbed. But tonight they've found something different. KV-20. The designation sounds clinical, boring. It's anything but, because this tomb is going to rewrite everything we thought we knew about ancient Egypt, about power, about a woman who broke every rule. The entrance is barely visible, a narrow shaft cut straight down into bedrock, 40 feet, 60. Deeper than any tomb they've seen. The workers lower oil lamps on ropes. Flickering light reveals corridors that twist and turn like a maze. This isn't your typical royal tomb. Something's wrong here. Or maybe something's very right. The air is different, thick with secrets, with the weight of 3 millennia. Davis himself goes down first. He doesn't know he's about to discover Egypt's most controversial pharaoh. The corridors are chaos, pottery shards everywhere, broken furniture, splintered wood that might have been chairs, chests, maybe even a throne. But here's what's strange. This isn't random looting. This is systematic destruction. Someone took their time. Someone with a very specific agenda. The walls tell the story. Hieroglyphs carved deep into limestone, but half of them are gone, chiseled out, scraped away, names obliterated, faces hacked off. This wasn't theft, this was character assassination, ancient-style cancel culture, with hammers and chisels. Davis holds his lamp closer to the wall. In the dancing shadows, fragments of inscription catch the light. Royal cartouches, the oval frames that hold pharaoh names, but they're empty, scratched out, defaced. Wait, not all of them. They're in the corner, where the Vandals missed. A few hieroglyphs remain. Hatshepsut. Davis doesn't recognize the name. No one does, because for 3,000 years she's been successfully erased from history. But fragments survive. Fragments always survive. And from fragments, we can rebuild an empire. The deeper chambers are worse, or better, depending on how you look at it. More destruction, more evidence. Pieces of canopic jars, mummy wrappings, gold leaf scattered like confetti. Someone stripped this place bare centuries ago, but they left clues, always clues. Because you can't truly erase someone from history, not completely. There are always witnesses, stone witnesses, and stones remember everything. The cold limestone walls of KV-20 have been keeping secrets. Tonight, under Davis's lamplight, they're finally ready to talk. Here's what Davis doesn't know yet. Can't know. He's looking at the tomb of the most successful female pharaoh in history. A woman who ruled Egypt for 22 years. Who built temples that still stand today. Who sent trading expeditions to the ends of the known world. Who wore the false beard of kingship and dared to call herself pharaoh, not queen, pharaoh. And for that audacity, for that crime against tradition, she was systematically erased. But you can't destroy achievement. You can only hide it. The sarcophagus chamber is the worst. 2 massive stone coffins, both empty, both showing signs of violent entry, lids smashed, contents long gone, but etched into the granite, more fragments, more clues, a relief showing a figure in traditional pharaoh regalia, false beard, royal headdress, but something's off. The proportions are feminine, subtle, but unmistakable once you know what you're looking for. This pharaoh had curves, had delicate features under that ceremonial beard. Davis sketches everything. He doesn't understand what he's found. Not yet. Christmas morning, 1903. Back in camp, Davis spreads out his sketches and photographs, tries to make sense of what he's found. The tomb construction is unique. The deepest in the valley, the most complex, clearly built for someone important, someone powerful, but the systematic destruction that tells a different story, that tells a story of fear, of threat, of a legacy so dangerous it had to be eliminated. Davis lights his pipe and stares at the fragments. Somewhere in these broken pieces is the story of ancient Egypt's greatest cover-up. What Davis has stumbled onto will take decades to understand fully. Generations of archaeologists will piece together the fragments. Will connect KV-20 to other sites, other clues, other evidence of systematic erasure. They'll find temples with missing names, obelisks walled up, statues smashed and buried, all targeting the same person, the same impossible, audacious woman who dared to claim the throne of the pharaohs. And they'll realize something incredible, something that changes everything we thought we knew about ancient Egypt, about women, about power. But that Christmas night in 1903, Davis just has questions and fragments, and the cold certainty that he's found something extraordinary, something dangerous, because someone 3,000 years ago was so threatened by this person's legacy that they tried to erase them completely, and almost succeeded. Almost, if not for missed corners, overlooked fragments, and the simple fact that limestone remembers everything, even what we're supposed to forget, especially what we're supposed to forget. The Valley of the Kings keeps its secrets until it's ready to share them. The wind picks up outside the tomb. Desert sand swirls around the entrance to KV-20, like the valley itself is stirring. Remembering, the fragments Davis found are just the beginning, puzzle pieces of a much larger story, a story of ambition and power, of tradition shattered and rebuilt, of a woman who looked at the greatest empire on earth and said, "Why not me? Why not now?" And for 22 years, she made it work. She made herself pharaoh until the backlash came, until the erasure began. Tomorrow, Davis will catalogue his finds, ship them back to Cairo, begin the long process of scholarly analysis. But tonight belongs to the mystery, to the silence of that vandalized tomb, to the echoes of a voice that was deliberately silenced, to fragments of a woman who refused to stay erased. Her name was Hatshepsut, and this is her story, the story they tried to bury, the story that survived in shadows and fragments, the story that's about to change everything we thought we knew about ancient Egypt. Chapter 2. A Pharaoh's Daughter, Born in the Shadows. 1507 BC. The Nile runs high this year. Thebes sprawls along its banks, drunk on wealth from Nubian gold and tribute from conquered lands. In the royal palace, limestone walls rise toward painted ceilings that mirror the star-filled heavens. This is Egypt at its absolute peak. Thutmose I rules with divine authority. His armies have pushed the borders further than any pharaoh before him. But tonight isn't about conquest. Tonight is about something that will shake the throne itself. The birth chamber fills with incense and whispered prayers. Queen Ahmose, the great royal wife, grips linen sheets as another contraction hits. She's done this before, lost children before. But the priests have read the omens. This child will live. More than live. Outside these walls, Thutmose sits in council with his generals, planning the next campaign into Syria. He has no idea that the future of his dynasty is about to arrive, not in the form he expects, not in the gender he needs. A daughter. The midwives exchange glances. In any noble household, this might be disappointing but manageable. In the royal house, it's complicated. Thutmose already has a son from another wife, Thutmose II. A sickly boy, but male. That's what matters in the succession laws. Still, as they place the baby girl in Queen Ahmose's arms, something feels different about this one. Her eyes open immediately, alert, almost calculating. They name her Hatshepsut, foremost of noble women. If only they knew. Ahmose holds her daughter close, studying the tiny face. This isn't her first child, but somehow she knows it's her most important. Queen Ahmose isn't just any royal wife. She comes from the legitimate bloodline. Her father was Pharaoh before Thutmose seized the throne through marriage and military genius. Through Ahmose, little Hatshepsut carries the pure royal blood that her half-brother lacks. It's a detail that will matter more than anyone realizes. Political dynamite wrapped in swaddling clothes. The midwives bow and whisper blessings over Egypt's newest princess. The palace becomes young Hatshepsut's entire universe. Corridors lined with painted scenes of divine pharaohs defeating chaos. Gardens where lotus flowers float in sacred pools. Servants who drop to their knees when she toddles past. Most royal children grow up isolated, protected, soft. Not this one. By age 3, she's everywhere. Watching the scribes work, listening at doorways when the council meets. Her curiosity is relentless. Dangerous, even, because she doesn't just watch, she understands. That's going to be a problem. 5 years old, and formal education begins. Most princesses learn music, dancing, household management, enough to be ornamental wives to foreign kings or Egyptian nobles. Hatshepsut gets the full royal treatment, same as any prince. Her first tutor, an elderly scribe named Hatshepsut, expects to teach basic hieroglyphs and simple arithmetic. Instead, he finds a student who memorizes entire prayers after hearing them once, who asks why the gods chose her father as pharaoh, who wants to know how tax collection actually works. Hatshepsut starts to sweat. Mathematics becomes her favorite subject, not because she's naturally gifted, because she sees how it connects to everything else. How many soldiers can march in a day? How much grain to feed them? What tribute should vassal kingdoms pay? How long to build a temple? Every number tells a story about power. Her tutors bring problems about pyramid construction and irrigation systems. She solves them, then asks better questions. What if we built the temple here instead? What if we taxed this way? Already thinking like a pharaoh. Reading and writing come naturally. Too naturally. Egyptian writing is complex. Hieroglyphs for sacred texts. Hieratic for everyday business. Diplomatic letters in Akkadian cuneiform. Most scribes specialize in one system. Hatshepsut masters all 3 by age 8. She's not just reading children's stories. She's reading trade agreements with Punt, military dispatches from the northern frontier, religious texts about divine kingship. Information is power, and she's hungry for it. Her father's advisors start to notice. That's when things get interesting. Statecraft lessons reveal her true nature. Role-playing diplomatic scenarios, she doesn't just memorize proper responses. She innovates, creates solutions her tutors haven't considered. When discussing a trade dispute with Nubia, she suggests something radical. What if Egypt bought their cooperation instead of demanding tribute? Wealth shared creates stronger loyalty than wealth stolen. Her tutor stops mid-sentence. This 8-year-old girl just solved a problem that's plagued the kingdom for decades. Word reaches the throne room. Thutmose himself requests a demonstration. Religious education poses the biggest challenge. Understanding the gods, the afterlife, divine kingship, it's all connected to legitimacy. Who can rule? Why can they rule? When the high priest explains that Pharaoh is the living Horus, son of Ra, Hatshepsut asks the obvious question. What about daughters of Ra? The priest fumbles. Tradition says, custom dictates, but she's read the sacred texts herself. Nothing explicitly forbids female pharaohs. It's just never happened. Yet, that word hangs in the air like incense smoke. Yet, court life teaches her observation skills. She watches how power really works, not through commands and threats, but through alliances and favours. Who whispers to whom after official meetings end? Which generals support which policies? How her father balances competing interests. The nobility fears royal power, but needs royal protection. The priests demand religious orthodoxy, but crave royal donations. The military wants conquest, but requires stable funding. It's all one vast, complex game, and she's learning the rules faster than anyone expected. Her relationship with Thutmose I becomes complicated. He's proud of her intelligence, but troubled by it. She's everything he could want in an heir, except female. During private audiences, she offers insights that impress him, suggests improvements to his building projects, remembers details about provincial governors that he's forgotten. Sometimes he catches himself treating her like a son, then remembers she's not. The succession laws are clear. Her half-brother will inherit. But those laws were written by men who never met Hatshepsut. By age 10, she understands her position perfectly. Too smart to ignore, too female to inherit, too royal to marry beneath her station, too valuable to waste on a foreign alliance. The court watches her with fascination and fear. What do you do with a princess who thinks like a pharaoh? Some whisper about unnatural ambition. Others see divine intelligence wasted by mortal customs. Hatshepsut says nothing, just keeps learning, keeps watching, keeps preparing. Because even at 10 years old, she's starting to form a plan that will shake Egypt to its foundations. The royal tutors compile their reports. Princess Hatshepsut exceeds all expectations in every subject. Mathematics, statecraft, languages, military strategy, religious knowledge. She surpasses most adult advisors. They recommend continued education at the highest levels. But privately they worry. Egypt has never seen anything like her. A mind this brilliant trapped in the wrong body for the throne. What happens when she fully realizes what she's capable of? What happens when she decides tradition isn't good enough? The shadows are gathering around the golden child, and she's learning to use them. Chapter 3. Wedding Bells of Duty and Desire. Thutmose I is dead. The great pharaoh who expanded Egypt's borders and built temples that touched the sky, gone. And now? Now the hard math of royal succession kicks in. See, you can't just let the throne sit empty while you figure things out. Egypt needs a pharaoh. The gods demand it. The people expect it. But here's the problem. Hatshepsut's still just a princess, a woman. And women don't rule Egypt. They marry pharaohs. So the court priests and advisors huddle up. Emergency meeting. The royal bloodline must continue. Can't have some distant cousin or ambitious general grabbing power. No, this needs to stay in the family. Pure royal blood. Which means Hatshepsut has to marry her half-brother. Thutmose II, her father's son by a minor wife. It's not romantic. It's not about love. It's about keeping the dynasty alive. About maintaining cosmic order, the god's will, even if it crushes a teenage girl's dreams. Picture Hatshepsut in those first weeks after her father's death. 15 years old. Still grieving the only person who ever believed she could rule. And now they're telling her, marry your half-brother, become his great royal wife, support his reign, bear his children, forget everything your father taught you about statecraft, about being strong, about thinking like a pharaoh. This is your role now. This is what royal women do. Stand behind the throne, never on it. The wedding ceremony happens fast. Has to. Egypt can't wait. Grand affair at Karnak Temple. All the pageantry you'd expect. Gold everywhere. Incense thick enough to choke on. Priests chanting in that ancient language that makes everything sound like divine command. But if you looked close at Hatshepsut's face during the vows, you might have seen something. Not rebellion exactly. Not yet. But calculation. Like she's already thinking 3 moves ahead. Already planning. Thutmose II. Her new husband. Her half-brother. The man who's now Pharaoh of Egypt. How do I put this delicately? He's not exactly Pharaoh material. Where his father was commanding, Thutmose II is hesitant. Where Thutmose I was decisive, his son second-guesses everything. Not cruel, not stupid, just weak. The kind of guy who asks 17 different advisors what they think before making any decision. And that creates an opportunity. See, when your pharaoh can't make up his mind, someone else starts making decisions. At first, it's the usual suspects. Old court officials, military commanders, senior priests. But gradually, quietly, Hatshepsut starts inserting herself into conversations. Perhaps we should consider, she suggests during council meetings. My father always said, she mentions. And because she actually knows what she's talking about, because her suggestions work, people start listening, really listening. The transformation doesn't happen overnight. Can't too dramatic a shift would threaten the established order. But month by month, Hatshepsut becomes more than just the great royal wife. She becomes the great royal wife who knows about trade routes, who understands temple construction, who can read diplomatic letters from foreign kings and craft responses that actually advance Egypt's interests. While her husband dithers, she delivers results. Think about the palace dynamics here. You've got this brilliant woman married to an indecisive man. She's been trained since childhood to think like a ruler. He inherited the crown but not the instincts. So what happens? Power starts flowing toward competence. Court officials begin bringing problems to her first. What does the great royal wife think? Becomes code for let's ask someone who actually has ideas. Dangerous precedent. Revolutionary precedent. The years drag on. 3, maybe 4. Hatshepsut plays her role perfectly in public, stands beside the throne, never on it, wears the great royal wife's regalia, performs the required rituals, but behind closed doors, she's essentially running the kingdom. Trade flourishes under her unofficial guidance. Building projects move forward on schedule. Egypt prospers, and all the while, she's learning something crucial about power. Sometimes you can have it without officially holding it. But here's the thing about unofficial power. It's fragile. Depends on other people's willingness to go along with the fiction. One strong pharaoh could shut her out completely. One court rebellion could end everything. She needs something more solid, more permanent. She needs legitimacy that can't be taken away on someone else's whim. She needs to be pharaoh herself. The idea is growing, taking shape, becoming possible. Meanwhile, Thutmose II's health starts declining. Not dramatically, not obviously, but those close to the palace notice things. He tires easily, gets sick more often, delegates even more responsibilities to others, particularly to his remarkably capable wife, the woman who seems to know Egypt's business better than anyone else in the kingdom, the woman who's been quietly accumulating influence, relationships, loyalty, the woman who's starting to think the unthinkable. You have to understand what Hatshepsut's contemplating has never been done. Not like this. Sure, there have been female rulers before, queen mothers serving as regents for young sons, but a woman actually claiming the throne, actually calling herself pharaoh, that's not just political revolution, that's cosmic disruption, breaking Ma'at, defying the gods themselves, Or maybe fulfilling a destiny that everyone else is too blind to see. The marriage that was supposed to sideline her has become her training ground. The duty that was meant to contain her ambition has taught her how to wield power subtly, effectively, without anyone quite realizing what's happening. She's learned to be indispensable, to make herself the solution to problems she didn't create. And now, with her husband's reign looking increasingly shaky, she's ready for the next phase, the impossible phase. Because here's what the old court advisors didn't count on when they forced this marriage. They thought they were neutralizing a threat, channeling Hatshepsut's intelligence into acceptable roles, supporting her husband, bearing royal children, maintaining the bloodline. Instead, they'd created something far more dangerous, a woman with legitimate claim to power and the skills to use it. The wedding bells had indeed rung, but they weren't celebrating the end of her ambitions. They were announcing the beginning. Chapter 4. The Bridge Across Time. Hatshepsut as regent. Picture this. Thutmose II dies after barely 4 years on the throne. Just gone. And what's he leaving behind? A 3-year-old heir named Thutmose III. A kingdom dealing with floods, failed harvests, rebellious vassals in Nubia, and Hatshepsut, 25 years old, watching everything her family built start to crumble. The priests are nervous. The generals are restless. Egypt needs leadership, strong leadership. But who's going to provide it? A toddler who can't even read hieroglyphs yet. The situation is honestly terrifying. The Nile's been acting up for 3 seasons running, flooding when it should be low, dry when the fields need water, granaries are half empty, the gold mines in Nubia, while the local chiefs figured out Egypt's looking weak right now. They've stopped sending tribute, started keeping the gold for themselves. Trade routes through Syria are getting dicey, and here's little Thutmose III, barely tall enough to see over the throne room table, supposed to handle all this. Right, that's not happening. So someone has to step up, and that someone is Hatshepsut. Not by choice, really, by necessity. The role of regent, it's not new. Queen mothers, royal wives, they've done this before, when kings die young, but usually for a year or 2 max, until the kid hits puberty, maybe learns to swing a sword properly. This feels different though, more permanent, more dangerous, because every day Hatshepsut makes decisions as regent, every decree she signs, every judgment she renders, she's getting better at this, and people are noticing. Her first major test comes fast. A border dispute in the south, Nubian raiders hitting Egyptian settlements, stealing cattle, capturing people for slaves. The generals want to march south immediately, full military response. Show these rebels what happens when you mess with Egypt. But Hatshepsut, she's thinking differently. She calls in the economic scribes, studies the trade records, realizes these aren't random raids, these are desperate people whose own harvests failed. So instead of sending troops, she sends grain, food aid, smart, really smart. The grain works. Within a month, the raids stop. The Nubian chiefs send delegations to Thebes. They're grateful, they're also impressed. This new regent, she thinks like a pharaoh. No, better than most pharaohs. She sees the big picture. Meanwhile, little Thutmose III is in the palace garden chasing butterflies with his tutors, learning to read, working on his royal wave. Cute kid, smart kid, probably, but he's still running around in short linen kilts, while his stepmother is basically running Egypt, and she's getting really, really good at it. Now here's where things get interesting. It's winter. Christmas Eve, well, obviously not Christmas, but you know what I mean. That quiet, reflective time of year. Hatshepsut's alone in her private chambers. The day's business is done, scrolls put away, seals locked up, and she's just sitting there, looking at her reflection in a bronze mirror. 25 years old, more powerful than any woman in the known world, and completely trapped. Because here's the thing nobody talks about. She's really good at this job, better than her dead husband ever was. But being good at ruling, that's not enough, is it? She's supposed to be temporary, a placeholder. Keep the throne warm until Thutmose III grows up, then gracefully step aside, hand over the power, go back to being a royal wife and mother. Maybe marry some general or governor to cement a political alliance. Traditional, expected, safe, accept. Look around. Egypt's actually thriving under her leadership. The Nile's cooperating again, trade's picking up, the treasury's rebuilding. People are starting to whisper that maybe, just maybe, the gods prefer her judgment to a child's. And this is eating at her, because Hatshepsut's not some power-hungry schemer. She genuinely cares about Egypt, about her people. She sees the tax records showing families can afford meat again. She hears reports of new construction projects, new temples, new irrigation canals, under her watch, because of her decisions. So what happens when Thutmose III turns 16, 18, 20? Does she really hand all this over to someone who's never negotiated a trade agreement or managed a harvest crisis? Someone who's spent his whole life being told he's the future pharaoh without proving it? She watches him sometimes. The little king. He's got his father's eyes, his grandfather's stubborn jaw. Good bloodline, royal breeding. But bloodline doesn't teach you how to read people. How to know when a province governor is skimming taxes, or when a general's loyalty might be wavering. Thutmose III plays with wooden soldiers, while Hatshepsut deals with real ones. He practices ceremonial speeches, while she negotiates actual treaties. And every day that gap gets wider. Every day she becomes more indispensable, more necessary. The palace staff has started treating her differently too. It's subtle, but it's there. They bring difficult questions to her first, not to the boy king's advisors. Foreign diplomats request audiences with the regent, not the pharaoh. The high priests of Ammon, they're watching her with new interest. Because here's what nobody wants to say out loud. Egypt's golden age isn't waiting for Thutmose III to grow up. It's happening right now, under Hatshepsut's rule, and she knows it. God help her, she knows it. That night, alone in her chamber, she does something dangerous. She imagines it, really imagines it, not stepping aside, not handing power over to a teenager who's never faced a real crisis. What if she just kept ruling? What if Egypt got to keep the leader who's actually good at the job? It's a terrifying thought, revolutionary, impossible. Women don't become pharaoh. Not really, not permanently. A few queen regents here and there, sure, but never like this, never by choice, never because they're simply better at it than the alternative. But here's the thing that really gets to her, the thing that keeps her awake at night. What if she's meant for this? What if the gods didn't let her husband die young by accident? What if they didn't make her so good at ruling by coincidence? What if all of this, is divine will? Her father Thutmose, I saw something in her, taught her statecraft when other fathers were teaching their daughters embroidery. Maybe he knew, maybe he understood what Egypt would need. Someone strong, someone smart, someone willing to break every rule to save the kingdom. She puts the mirror down, walks to her window. Thebes stretches out below, peaceful and prosperous under her protection. Her protection. The citizens sleeping safely tonight because of decisions she made, policies she implemented, threats she neutralized, and somewhere in the palace, a little boy dreams of becoming pharaoh, while the woman who's already doing the job wonders if she has the courage to admit it, to claim it, to fight for it, because that's what it would take. A fight against tradition, against expectation, against everyone who thinks they know what women can and can't do. This is the moment everything changes, not the decision that comes later. but the realization, the understanding that she's already crossed a line she can't uncross. She's not just a regent anymore. She's not just keeping the throne warm. She's ruling Egypt, and doing it better than most pharaohs in history. The only question now is whether she'll keep pretending otherwise, whether she'll keep hiding behind the fiction of temporary power, or whether she'll have the audacity to claim what's already hers. The bridge across time is almost complete, and on the other side, something unprecedented. Chapter 5. A New Dawn. Christmas crowning of a female pharaoh. 2 years. That's how long Hatshepsut played by the rules. 2 years of being regent for little Thutmose III. 2 years of making all the real decisions, while everyone pretended she was just keeping the throne warm. But here's the thing about brilliant women who taste real power. They don't give it back easily. And Hatshepsut? She was about to do something that would shake Egypt to its core. Something no woman had ever dared before. Picture this. The palace halls in Thebes. Morning light streaming through the columns. Hatshepsut's advisors are gathered for what they think is another routine meeting about grain distributions or trade routes. But she's got something else on her mind. Something that's been building for months. You can almost see her taking that deep breath, the one you take before you burn all your bridges. Because what she's about to announce will change everything, not just for her, for the entire concept of who gets to rule Egypt. The words probably came out steady, controlled, because Hatshepsut was always controlled. I am no longer regent, she announces. I am pharaoh, just like that. Can you imagine the silence? The absolute shock rippling through that room. This wasn't a coup exactly. She wasn't deposing Thutmose III, but she was claiming something no Egyptian woman had ever claimed before, the full divine authority of Pharaoh, the living embodiment of Horus, the son of Ra, except she wasn't a son, and she didn't care. Here's what's wild about this moment. It wasn't really about rebellion, at least not how Hatshepsut saw it. She genuinely believed she was saving Egypt. Think about it. 2 pharaohs had died young. The kingdom needed stability, and who had been running things successfully for 2 years? Her, who understood trade, architecture, diplomacy. Her, who had royal blood through her father. Also her. In her mind, this wasn't breaking the rules. This was common sense. Egypt needed a pharaoh who could actually pharaoh. But claiming to be pharaoh and convincing Egypt you actually are pharaoh, 2 very different things. Hatshepsut knew she needed more than bold declarations. She needed divine legitimacy, religious approval, and here's where her political genius shows. She didn't just announce she was pharaoh. She launched the most sophisticated propaganda campaign ancient Egypt had ever seen, starting with something that should have been impossible. Convincing the priests of Amun-Ra that a woman could be the living god on earth. Somehow she pulled it off. The first images start appearing on temple walls shortly after her announcement. But here's what's fascinating and kind of heartbreaking. Hatshepsut begins depicting herself as male, false beard, broad shoulders, masculine clothing, even changing her pronouns in the hieroglyphs from feminine to masculine. She's literally erasing her own gender to fit into a role that was never meant for women. It's brilliant political theatre, but imagine having to deny your own identity just to rule effectively. That's the price she paid for power. The divine birth story comes next. Pure political genius. Hatshepsut commissions reliefs, showing her miraculous conception, not by her human father Thutmose I, but by the god Amun-Ra himself. The art shows Amun choosing her mother, Queen Ahmose, specifically to bear his divine daughter. It's completely made up, but it gives Hatshepsut something no male challenger can claim, direct divine parentage. Not just blessed by the gods, actually fathered by them. Try arguing with that in ancient Egypt. The priests eat it up. Meanwhile, little Thutmose III is still technically pharaoh too. This is the part that blows my mind. Hatshepsut doesn't depose him, she just absorbs all his power while keeping him around as window dressing. Smart politics. Less chance of civil war if she's not technically usurping the legitimate heir. So on paper, Egypt has two pharaohs. In reality, Hatshepsut makes every decision that matters. Thutmose III gets to play with toy soldiers and learn military strategy. She runs the empire. Talk about having your cake and eating it too. The coronation ceremony itself. We don't have exact details, but imagine the pageantry, the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt placed on her head, the crook and flail in her hands, the false beard strapped to her chin, all of Egypt watching as their first female pharaoh takes the throne. Some probably thrilled, others horrified, but nobody can deny she looks the part. And more importantly, she's already proven she can do the job. 2 years of successful regency speak louder than gender expectations, even in ancient Egypt. Here's where the Christmas connection gets interesting. Not because ancient Egyptians celebrated Christmas, obviously, but because both stories are about reclamation, about taking back what was rightfully yours. Hatshepsut sees herself as reclaiming the throne for competent leadership, for prosperity over chaos, for wisdom over tradition. She's not breaking the rules out of spite. She's breaking them because the rules are broken. And just like that Christmas star rising bright in the eastern sky, Hatshepsut is about to outshine everyone. The immediate aftermath is surprisingly smooth. No civil war, no mass uprising. Turns out most Egyptians care more about stable grain prices than gender politics. The bureaucracy keeps running. Trade continues flowing, the Nile still floods on schedule, and suddenly everyone realizes something important. Egypt doesn't need a male pharaoh to function, it just needs a good pharaoh, and Hatshepsut. She's proving to be very, very good at this job, which probably terrifies certain people more than open rebellion would have. But she's not content with just surviving the transition. Hatshepsut wants to prove she's not just adequate, she's exceptional. Plans are already forming for the most ambitious trade expedition Egypt has ever attempted. Architectural projects that will dwarf anything her predecessors built, obelisks that will scrape the sky, and a mortuary temple so beautiful it will still be stunning tourists 3,500 years later. This isn't just about being pharaoh. This is about being the greatest pharaoh Egypt has ever seen, and honestly, she might just pull it off. Think about this moment from young Thutmose III's perspective. You're maybe 10 years old, you are pharaoh. Now your stepmother, aunt, whatever complicated family relationship this is, has basically stolen your job, but she's letting you keep the title. And the truth is, she's incredibly good at running Egypt. Do you resent her? Respect her? Both? That tension is going to simmer for decades. Because Thutmose III isn't going anywhere. He's learning, watching, waiting, and someday, he'll get his chance to rule alone. So there she stands, Hatshepsut, first female pharaoh of Egypt. The false beard might look ridiculous to us, but to her people, she looks like divine authority incarnate. And as that metaphorical Christmas star rises over the Nile, as this new dawn breaks over Thebes, Egypt is about to enter one of the most prosperous periods in its entire history. Not because a man is on the throne, but because the right person finally is. And that person just happens to be a woman who refused to let gender define her limits. Picture this, the most powerful woman in ancient Egypt, standing before temple walls, watching artists chisel away her feminine form. Stone by stone, curve by curve, they're erasing her womanhood, adding muscles where there were none, carving a false beard onto her divine face. This isn't vandalism, this is reinvention. Hatshepsut is becoming someone else entirely, someone the gods and people could accept as pharaoh. Someone male. This is her greatest performance, her divine masquerade. Chapter 6. The Divine Masquerade, a Pharaoh's Advent Tale. The workshops of Thebes are buzzing with the most unusual commission in Egyptian history. Master sculptors, the best in the kingdom, are being asked to do something that goes against everything they've learned. Take their female pharaoh and make her a man. Not just any man, a divine king blessed by the gods themselves. The chisels are sharp, the limestone is perfect. But can art really change reality? The transformation begins with the body. Gone are the soft curves that marked Hatshepsut as female in earlier reliefs. The artists add broad shoulders, defined chest muscles, strong arms. They elongate her torso, widen her stance. Most striking of all, they give her the false beard of divinity, that ceremonial symbol worn by every legitimate pharaoh since the beginning of time. In stone, she's becoming what she could never be in flesh, a man worthy of absolute power, but the physical changes are just the beginning. Something even more radical is happening in the hieroglyphs surrounding these images. The pronouns are shifting. Where once the text referred to her as she, now it reads he. Where it once called her daughter of Ra, now she's the son of Ra. It's not just art anymore. It's language itself bending to accommodate her ambition, words becoming weapons in her war for legitimacy. Then comes the masterstroke, the origin story to end all origin stories. Hatshepsut doesn't just want masculine pronouns and fake beards, she wants divine parentage. So her scribes craft the most audacious tale in royal propaganda history. The great god Amun-Ra himself chose her mother, Queen Ahmose, visited her in divine form, made love to her, and from that union came Hatshepsut, not just pharaoh by inheritance, pharaoh by divine right, the god's own daughter, son. The divine birth scenes are carved with exquisite detail across temple walls. Amun-Ra, in all his glory, approaching the beautiful Queen Ahmose, their divine union blessing Egypt with a ruler chosen by heaven itself. These aren't just decorations, they're constitutional documents written in stone. Proof positive that Hatshepsut's right to rule comes not from human inheritance, but from the gods themselves. How do you argue with that? You don't. You bow and obey. But Hatshepsut isn't putting all her eggs in the divine basket. She's also playing up her human royal bloodline for all it's worth. New inscriptions emphasize her father Thutmose I's greatness at every opportunity. His military victories, his building projects, his wisdom, and most importantly, his choice of her as successor. Did he actually choose her? That's debatable, but in these new texts, it's presented as absolute fact, divine daughter and royal heir. Here's what's brilliant about this whole masquerade. It attacks the problem of female rule from every possible angle. Religious objection. She's Amun-Ra's child. Legal objection. Her father designated her. Cultural objection. Look at these reliefs. She's clearly male. Visual objection. That's a proper pharaoh's beard right there. Social objection. The pronouns say he. She's not trying to change Egypt's mind about women ruling. She's convincing Egypt she's not really a woman. The campaign rolls out across Egypt's most important temples. Karnak, Luxor, el-Bahari. Everywhere people come to worship, they see the same message. Hatshepsut, the divine king. Hatshepsut, the male ruler. Hatshepsut, the legitimate pharaoh. It's the ancient world's most sophisticated propaganda operation. Every relief tells the same story. Every inscription uses the same pronouns. Every statue shows the same masculine form. Consistency is key. Doubt is the enemy. Think about the craftsmen doing this work. Master artists who've spent their lives perfecting the female form, now being asked to masculinize their own pharaoh. Some probably think it's sacrilege, others see it as the commission of a lifetime. All of them understand the stakes. Get this wrong, and they're not just bad artists, they're threats to the divine order, so they chisel carefully, precisely. creating a new reality, one stroke at a time. The people's reaction is complicated. The older generation remembers when Hatshepsut was clearly depicted as female. They've watched her gradual transformation in real time. Some whisper about it in the markets. Others accept it as divine will. The younger generation, though, they're growing up seeing her as male from the start. For them, this isn't deception. It's just reality. King Hatshepsut has always been King Hatshepsut. The masquerade is becoming truth. But what about Hatshepsut herself? How does it feel to watch your womanhood being chiselled away? To hear yourself referred to with masculine pronouns? To see your body transformed into something you're not? There's no record of her personal feelings about this radical reinvention. Maybe she saw it as necessary sacrifice. Maybe it hurt. Maybe she felt relief. All we know is, she commissioned every bit of it. This was her choice, her gift to herself. And you know what? It works. The divine masquerade succeeds beyond her wildest dreams. Egypt accepts her masculine portrayals. The priests perform the proper rituals. The people pay their taxes. The borders remain secure. Trade flourishes. The gods seem pleased with their divine son-daughter. For nearly 2 decades, this reinvention holds firm. Hatshepsut has literally carved herself a new identity and made it stick. Art becomes reality. Fiction becomes fact. But here's the thing about masquerades. They only work as long as everyone agrees to play along. And in the shadows, a young man named Thutmose III is growing up, getting stronger, learning to lead armies, watching his step-aunt play king in masculine drag. He's not saying much yet, but he's remembering everything. Every fake beard, every false pronoun, every divine lie carved in stone. And when his time comes, well, that's a story for another night. Chapter 7. Cartouches and Caravans. The Journey to Punt. Picture this. It's winter in ancient Egypt. The Nile's receding, crops are planted. And while we might think of December snow and Christmas trees, the Egyptians had their own version of seasonal magic happening. This is when Hatshepsut decided to pull off something absolutely incredible. A trade expedition that would make her legendary. Not just any trading mission, but a journey to the mysterious land of Punt. A place so exotic, so wealthy, that most Egyptians thought it was basically paradise on earth. Now we're talking around 1470 BC. Hatshepsut's been pharaoh for about 15 years. Egypt's thriving. No wars to drain the treasury, no rebellions to crush. Just pure, steady prosperity. The kind of economic boom that lets you think big, really big. And Hatshepsut, she's thinking about Punt. This semi-mythical land somewhere down the Red Sea coast, maybe modern-day Somalia, Ethiopia, or Eritrea. Nobody's exactly sure. What they did know, Punt had everything Egypt wanted. Frankincense, myrrh, gold, ivory, exotic animals, the works. Here's what gets me about this whole thing. Hatshepsut didn't just want the goods. She wanted the spectacle, the prestige. Think about it. She's still fighting for legitimacy as a female pharaoh. Every decision has to prove she's worthy. And what says legitimate ruler better than pulling off a trade expedition that brings back literal tons of treasure? Plus, this is happening during what we'd call the Christmas season. The Egyptians called it Peret, the growing season. Perfect timing for a journey that would bring back gifts fit for the gods. The planning alone must have taken months. You don't just sail to Punt on a whim. First they had to get to the Red Sea. That meant dismantling entire ships on the Nile, carrying them piece by piece across the eastern desert, then rebuilding them on the coast. We're talking about a caravan of maybe 3,000 people. Sailors, soldiers, craftsmen, porters, all marching through hostile desert with ship parts on their backs. The logistics would make a modern military planner weep, but Hatshepsut made it happen. The ships themselves were gorgeous. We know because Hatshepsut had artists carve every detail into her temple walls at el-Bahari. 5 ships, each about 70 feet long. shallow draft for river work, but sturdy enough for open ocean. 30 rowers per ship, plus cargo space for, well, we'll get to that. The expedition leader was probably a guy named Nehesi, Chancellor of the god, high-ranking official who'd earned Hatshepsut's complete trust. Because this wasn't just about trade. This was about making a statement that would echo through Egyptian history. The journey south took weeks, hugging the coastline, following ancient trade routes that connected Africa's civilizations. And when they finally reached Punt, the reception was incredible. The local rulers, King Pharaoh and Queen Ati, welcomed them like long-lost relatives, which, in a sense, they were. The Egyptians believed Punt was where their gods came from, the original homeland. So this wasn't just a trade mission, it was a homecoming, a pilgrimage, and the Puntites treated it that way, rolling out every luxury they had. What the Egyptians saw in Punt blew their minds. Houses built on stilts, cattle with enormous horns, people who looked Egyptian but wore different clothes, spoke different languages, and the wealth, oh, the wealth was unbelievable. Gold dust traded by the pound, frankincense trees growing wild, myrrh harvested from thorny bushes, ivory from elephants, leopard skins, live baboons chattering in trees. This was the ancient world's Amazon rainforest, biodiversity that seemed impossible, resources that made Egypt rich, but made Punt legendary. The trading took months, not just haggling over prices, they were building relationships, diplomatic ties. The Puntites had been trading with Egypt for centuries, but this was different. This was pharaoh-level diplomacy. State visits, gift exchanges, and Nehesi wasn't just buying goods, he was recruiting people, craftsmen who knew how to work frankincense, traders who understood the routes to other lands. This was Egypt building its first real international trading network. Think medieval Venice, but 3,000 years earlier, and run by a woman the world was trying to forget. When they finally loaded the ships for home, it must have been incredible to see. The temple reliefs show everything, myrrh trees, actual living trees, roots and all, being carefully planted in pots for the journey home. Sacks of gold dust, ivory tusks stacked like lumber, cages full of baboons, cheetahs, leopards, live cattle somehow crammed onto these wooden ships. Plus 31 myrrh trees, 31 myrrh trees, 31. That's not trade goods, that's transplanting an entire ecosystem. Hatshepsut wanted to bring Punt home, literally, garden and all. The return journey was pure triumph. Imagine these ships crawling up the Red Sea, loaded so heavy with treasure they could barely float. Animals roaring, incense smoking, gold glinting in the sun. When they reached the desert, they had to reverse the whole process, dismantle the ships again, load everything onto donkeys and camels, march back across the burning sand to the Nile. But this time, they weren't just carrying ship parts. They were carrying proof that Hatshepsut was the greatest pharaoh Egypt had ever seen. The arrival at Thebes was like nothing Egypt had ever witnessed. Picture it, the royal barge pulling up to the dock, with Queen Hatshepsut standing at the prow. Behind her, ship after ship loaded with impossible treasures. Crowds lining the riverbank, priests chanting, and then the parade, live baboons walking on leashes, leopards in cages, myrrh trees being carried by teams of men, gold being weighed in front of cheering crowds. This wasn't just successful trade, this was magic, divine favour made visible, proof that the gods loved their female pharaoh. Hatshepsut knew exactly how to play this. The temple reliefs at Deir el-Bahari tell the whole story, but they tell it as religious narrative. This wasn't just trade, this was divine mission. The god Amun-Ra himself had commanded the expedition. The treasures weren't just wealth, they were offerings to the gods. The myrrh trees were planted in the temple gardens as eternal gifts. Every detail calculated to prove that Hatshepsut wasn't just a successful ruler, she was chosen by the gods themselves, female or not. The economic impact was massive. Egypt now had direct access to luxury goods that previously came through middlemen: frankincense for religious ceremonies, myrrh for mummification, gold for everything. But more than that, Egypt had a new international reputation. Other kingdoms started sending delegations, trade missions, diplomatic gifts. Hatshepsut had turned Egypt into the ancient world's superpower through commerce instead of conquest, through negotiation instead of war. 22 years of peace and prosperity, all starting with one brilliant winter expedition to a legendary land. Those temple reliefs are still there today, carved into stone at el-Bahari, every detail preserved. The ships, the treasures, the exotic animals, even Queen Ati of Punt, with her distinctive features and elaborate jewellery. It's ancient Egypt's most detailed record of international trade. But it's more than that. It's proof that a woman could rule as brilliantly as any man, could bring prosperity instead of war, could build legacy instead of just seizing power. A Christmas story, Egyptian style, gifts that changed the world. Chapter 8. A Christmas construct. Temples, pyramids, and propaganda. Here's something wild about ancient power. You can't just declare yourself pharaoh and expect people to believe it. You have to prove it. And Hatshepsut? She proved it in stone. Massive, impossible, breathtaking stone that screamed, "I belong here," across the Nile Valley. Every obelisk, every temple, every carved relief was a political statement. Architecture as propaganda, building as legitimacy, and her masterpiece, well, that was going to change everything about how pharaohs presented themselves forever. Think about it this way. When you're the first woman to claim absolute power in Egypt, you can't just sit back and govern quietly. Every single day, someone's questioning whether you belong there. Every priest, every noble, every foreign ambassador looking at you thinking, this isn't how it's supposed to work. So what do? You build something so magnificent, so impossible to ignore, that it becomes undeniable proof of divine favour. You create monuments that will outlast your critics, that will speak for you long after you're gone. Hatshepsut started with the obvious stuff, finishing projects her father began at Karnak, completing pylons, adding chambers, making sure everyone knew the royal bloodline continued strong. But that was just maintenance. Any decent ruler could do that. She needed something bigger, something that would make people stop in their tracks and go, wait, who is this pharaoh? Because here's the thing about ancient Egypt. Your buildings were your resume, and Hatshepsut was writing the most ambitious resume in history, stone by stone, block by block, proving she deserved to wear the double crown. The obelisks came next, and not just any obelisks, the tallest ones anyone had ever attempted. We're talking nearly 100 feet of solid granite, carved from a single block at Aswan, transported down the Nile on specially built barges, each one weighing around 300 tons. The engineering alone was insane. But here's what gets me. She didn't just build them. She carved her story into them. Her divine birth, her father's blessing, her right to rule. Every hieroglyph was a legal argument carved in stone, evidence that would survive millennia. But the real statement, the project that would define her reign, was brewing in her mind as she stood across the river from Thebes, looking at this natural amphitheatre of cliffs on the west bank, this sacred space where pharaohs had been buried for generations. She was going to build something unprecedented there. Not a pyramid, not a traditional tomb, but a mortuary temple that would rewrite the rules of royal architecture. A temple that would rise from the desert floor in 3 perfect terraces, something that had never been attempted before. Here's where Senamut comes in. Her chief architect, closest advisor, possibly much more than that. This guy rose from absolutely nothing, minor official from a provincial family, to become the most powerful man in Egypt after Hatshepsut herself. And he understood exactly what she needed. Not just a building, a revolution in stone, something that would integrate seamlessly with the natural landscape while screaming divine authority, something feminine in its curves and terraces, yet undeniably pharaonic in its scale. Architecture that would challenge every assumption about power, gender, and rulership. The design was radical. 3 terraces carved into the cliff face, connected by ramps that seemed to float in the air, gardens with myrrh trees brought back from Punt, colonnades that created perfect shadows at sunrise. And here's the brilliant part. It didn't compete with the landscape. It completed it. Like the cliff had always been meant to hold this temple, like the gods had carved this space specifically for Hatshepsut's monument. Every angle, every proportion, every sightline was calculated to create a sense of inevitability. This was meant to be here. Construction took years, thousands of workers, hundreds of artists and craftsmen. The logistics alone were staggering, moving massive limestone blocks across the Nile, carving reliefs that would survive millennia, engineering ramps and foundations that could support the weight of a mountain. But Hatshepsut was building more than a temple. She was building a visual argument for her legitimacy that would be impossible to ignore. Every morning, people in Thebes would wake up and see this impossible structure growing against the cliffs, proof that the gods favoured their female pharaoh. The lower terrace celebrated her earthly achievements. Reliefs showing the Punt expedition, trade goods flowing into Egypt, prosperity under her rule. The middle terrace told her divine birth story, how Amun-Ra himself was her father, how she was chosen before birth to rule Egypt. And the upper terrace, that was pure religious power, the sanctuary where her royal car would receive offerings for eternity, where priests would perform rituals to maintain Ma'at, cosmic order, through her divine presence, each level building the case for her reign, from practical success to divine mandate. But here's what made it truly revolutionary. The relief showed Hatshepsut in ways no pharaoh had ever been depicted, sometimes as a traditional king with false beard and masculine proportions, sometimes in feminine dress but with royal regalia, sometimes transitioning between male and female forms within the same scene. It was architectural gender bending on a massive scale, a visual argument that pharaonic power transcended simple male-female categories, that she could be whatever kind of ruler Egypt needed, traditional when tradition served, revolutionary when revolution was required. The completed temple was breathtaking. Even today, after millennia of damage and defacement, it stops you in your tracks. Imagine seeing it in Hatshepsut's time, gleaming white limestone, painted reliefs in brilliant colours, gardens blooming with exotic trees, priests in white linen conducting daily rituals. A monument that seemed to merge earth and heaven, human achievement and divine will. Visitors would climb those ramps feeling like they were ascending to the realm of the gods. And at the top, proof that a woman could command such devotion, such resources, such artistic genius. The political message was unmistakable. Any Egyptian seeing Deir el-Bahari knew they were looking at the achievement of someone with absolute divine approval. You don't get to build something like this unless the gods are completely on your side. It was Hatshepsut's ultimate trump card against any challenger. How do you argue with architecture this magnificent? How do you claim someone lacks legitimacy when they've created the most beautiful temple complex in Egyptian history? Stone doesn't lie. Stone doesn't flatter. Stone just endures and proclaims the truth of her reign. But there was something else happening here. Something that went beyond politics and propaganda. Hatshepsut wasn't just building monuments to herself. She was expanding what was possible for women in power. Every Egyptian girl who grew up seeing those terraces rise against the cliffs learned something new about female potential. Every foreign ambassador who visited Egypt had to reconsider their assumptions about women's capabilities. She was using architecture to literally reshape cultural imagination, to create new possibilities where none had existed before. A Christmas construct indeed, building something extraordinary from available materials. By the end of her building campaigns, Hatshepsut had transformed the landscape of royal power. Her obelisks pierced the sky at Karnak. Her temple complex dominated the West Bank. Her architectural legacy was written in stone across Egypt. She'd proven that a female pharaoh could command resources, inspire artists, and create monuments that would last forever. But monuments, as she was about to discover, can be destroyed. Stone can be defaced, names can be chiseled away, and sometimes the very success that proves your right to rule becomes the evidence future enemies use to justify erasing you entirely. Chapter 9. Story of a Starlit Love. Hatshepsut and Senenmut. December nights in ancient Thebes. Stars scattered across the Nile like diamonds, and in the palace, Egypt's female pharaoh sits with her closest advisor, the man who started with nothing, who built everything, Senenmut. His name means mother's brother, but that's not what he became to her. This is the story people whispered about for 22 years. The architect, the confidant, the man who dared love a pharaoh. Maybe the evidence is complicated. Picture this kid. Senmut, born in Armant, south of Thebes. Parents are nobodies. Father's a mid-level priest. Mother weaves cloth. Nothing about his birth screams future power broker. But he's smart. Really smart. Gets noticed at the local temple school. Can read hieroglyphs like other kids read picture books. Math comes easy. Architecture makes sense to him. And somehow word reaches Thebes. There's this brilliant boy down south. Hatshepsut's still great royal wife then. But she's already collecting talented people, building her network. When Senenmut first arrives at court, he's maybe 14. Hatshepsut's in her 20s, already making real decisions while her husband Thutmose II deals with his various health problems. She needs people she can trust, people who owe everything to her. Senenmut fits perfectly. He's not from some established noble family with their own agenda. He's hers, completely. And she recognizes something in him, that hunger, that brilliant mind that sees solutions where others see problems. She starts small, minor administrative tasks, but she's watching. Here's what's fascinating. As Hatshepsut rises, so does he. When she becomes regent after Thutmose II dies, Senenmut gets promoted to tutor. He's teaching little Thutmose III and Neferure, Hatshepsut's daughter, but that's just the visible job. Behind scenes, he's her sounding board, her strategist, the person she talks through decisions with. Late nights in the palace, maps spread across tables, building plans, trade routes, and yeah, people start talking. Because this isn't normal. Pharaohs don't get this close to their advisors, ever. Then Hatshepsut declares herself pharaoh. Year 2 of little Thutmose III's supposed reign, and Senenmut. He becomes the most powerful commoner in Egypt, overseer of all works of the king, chief architect, steward of Amun, tutor to the heir. The man controls massive construction projects, handles trade negotiations, has access to the pharaoh whenever he wants. Other nobles hate this. Here's some nobody from nowhere, speaking for Egypt's ruler, making decisions that affect the entire kingdom. But Hatshepsut doesn't care. She trusts him completely. The rumours start early. Court gossips love this stuff. Egypt's most powerful woman and her humble advisor. They spend hours together, private meetings, late conversations. He's never married. Interesting. She's ruling as a male pharaoh, but she's still a woman, and he's the one person who sees both sides of her. The public king and the private woman. Egyptian court etiquette is incredibly formal. Pharaohs don't have friends, they have subjects, but whatever Hatshepsut and Senenmut have, it breaks all the rules. And people notice. They always notice. Look at what he builds for her. This is where it gets romantic, whether they meant it that way or not. Deir el-Bahari, her mortuary temple, most beautiful building in Egypt. Senenmut designs every detail, terraces carved into cliffsides, gardens that shouldn't be possible in the desert, columns that seem to grow from the rock. It's not just architecture, it's poetry in stone, a love letter written in limestone and granite. And here's the crazy part. He hides his own tomb right underneath it, literally beneath her eternal resting place. That hidden tomb, man. When archaeologists found it in the 1920s, they couldn't believe what they were seeing. Secret passages connecting to Hatshepsut's temple above. Chambers filled with astronomical calculations. Star charts everywhere. Because Senenmut's also her chief astronomer, the guy who plans her building projects by celestial movements, who times festivals to align with sacred dates, who probably told her the stars were favourable when she decided to become pharaoh. His tomb isn't just hidden, it's intimate, like he wanted to be close to her forever. But here's what really makes you wonder. Throughout Egypt, pharaohs are depicted with their families, their children, their spouses, standard royal art. Hatshepsut breaks this pattern. In most of her official images, there's Senenmut. Not as husband, that would be impossible. But he's there, teaching her daughter, overseeing construction, standing respectfully nearby while she makes offerings to gods. No other pharaoh does this. No other advisor gets this kind of visual prominence. Art is political in ancient Egypt. Every image means something. So what does this mean? 22 years they work together. Egypt prospers like never before. Trade missions to Punt, bringing exotic goods. Massive building projects employing thousands. Peace maintained through diplomacy instead of war. And through it all, Senenmut's right beside her. The kid from nowhere who became the second most powerful person in the known world. But power like that, it makes enemies. Other nobles plot against him. Priests resent his influence. Even young Thutmose III watches and waits, because eventually Hatshepsut will die. And then what happens to her favourite? The end comes suddenly. Around year 20 of Hatshepsut's reign, Senenmut vanishes from the record. Just gone. No more building inscriptions, no more titles, no more mentions in official documents. Did he die? Fall from favour? Get quietly eliminated by rivals? We don't know. But his disappearance happens right before Hatshepsut's own death. Maybe he saw what was coming. Maybe he knew that after she died, there wouldn't be room in Egypt for the man who loved her. Whether that love was romantic or not. When Thutmose III finally becomes sole pharaoh, the erasure begins. Hatshepsut's images get chiselled away, her cartouches scraped off monuments, her obelisks walled up, and Senenmut, his fate's even worse, not just erased, forgotten entirely. His beautiful tomb beneath her temple gets sealed and lost for 3,000 years. His astronomical ceiling covered in rubble, his carefully planned eternal rest interrupted by political vengeance. Because he wasn't just her advisor, he was proof that she'd broken the rules, that she'd chosen her own companions. But love stories survive, even when power tries to bury them. Modern archaeologists piece together fragments, a statue here, an inscription there, tomb walls that tell stories of partnership, of trust, of two brilliant people who found each other across impossible social barriers. Was it romance? We'll never know for sure. Egyptian records don't do relationship status, but something extraordinary happened between the pharaoh who ruled as a man and the commoner who stood beside her throne. Something worth hiding beneath temples, something worth remembering under stars. On these December nights, when stars wheel overhead like they did 4,000 years ago, you can almost picture them, Hatshepsut and Senenmut, planning tomorrow's building project, discussing trade routes to distant lands, sharing the weight of ruling an empire, two minds that understood each other completely, maybe two hearts that found something impossible in a world that didn't allow it. The female pharaoh and her architect, the most powerful love story ancient Egypt tried to erase. But here we are, still telling it, still wondering, still believing in starlit love. Chapter 10. 2 decades of prosperity. Hatshepsut's golden Christmas reign. 22 years. That's how long Hatshepsut held absolute power in Egypt. 22 years of peace, of wealth flowing into Thebes like the Nile at flood, of temples rising toward the gods, and trade ships returning heavy with treasure. But here's what makes this incredible. She did it all while half the known world thought a woman pharaoh was cosmic blasphemy. Every single day she had to prove herself, again and again. Think about the pressure. Every morning Hatshepsut wakes up, knowing that one mistake, one failed harvest, one lost trade route, one military defeat, and the whispers start. See? This is what happens when you put a woman in charge. But she doesn't just survive this impossible standard. She thrives. Egypt under Hatshepsut becomes richer than it's been in generations. More stable, more respected. She's not just holding the throne, she's making it shine brighter than ever. Her strategy: completely flip the script on what pharaohs are supposed to do. Traditional Egyptian kingship, it's all about conquest. Military campaigns, bringing home slaves and gold from defeated enemies. Hatshepsut looks at this playbook and basically says, no thanks. She's got a different vision. Instead of armies marching out to crush neighbours, she's sending trading expeditions. Instead of building monuments to celebrate military victories, she's creating temples that celebrate peace and prosperity. The expedition to Punt becomes legendary. We're talking about Somalia, maybe Ethiopia, this mysterious land the Egyptians called God's Land. Hatshepsut sends 5 ships down the Red Sea. They come back loaded with frankincense trees, myrrh, gold, ivory, leopard skins, live baboons. The Egyptians had never seen anything like it. She takes these frankincense trees and plants them in terraces at her temple, living proof that diplomacy and trade work better than conquest. But she's not naive about the politics. Every building project, every temple relief, every obelisk is carefully calculated propaganda. Look at el-Bahari, her mortuary temple. It's this architectural masterpiece, built into the cliffs of the Valley of the Kings. 3 terraces rising toward the mountains. And every wall tells the same story. Hatshepsut was chosen by the gods. Hatshepsut brought prosperity. Hatshepsut is the rightful pharaoh. She's literally carving her legitimacy into stone. Her inner circle is fascinating. Senmut, her chief architect, probably her lover, he rises from basically nothing to become one of the most powerful men in Egypt. Hapaseneb, her vizier, keeps the administration running smoothly. Nehesi leads the Punt expedition and comes back a hero. These aren't just advisors, they're true believers. They see what she's building and they want to be part of it. The old guard might grumble, but Hatshepsut's creating a new generation of leadership. And then there's Thutmose III. Officially, he's co-pharaoh. In reality, he's commander of the army and not much else. For 22 years, he watches Hatshepsut make all the important decisions. He leads military exercises, commands the palace guard, shows up at ceremonies. But the real power? That flows through Hatshepsut. And you know he's keeping track of every slight, every moment where she gets credit for Egypt's success. That resentment is building year after year. Daily life in Hatshepsut's Egypt is remarkably peaceful. The provinces send their tributes on time because the economy is stable. Scribes have steady work recording trade deals instead of casualty reports. Artisans are building temples and tombs for the living, not memorials for war dead. Farmers know their harvests won't be seized to feed marching armies. It's not exciting in the traditional pharaoh way, but it works. People are fed, families stay together, Egypt prospers. Religiously, she's walking this incredible tightrope. She needs the priests of Amun to accept her as pharaoh, so she builds them beautiful temples, sponsors festivals, makes generous offerings, but she also promotes the idea that she's the daughter of Amun-Ra himself. Divine birth, royal bloodline, direct divine appointment. It's brilliant political theatre. The priests get rich temples and prestige. She gets religious legitimacy. Everyone wins, as long as the prosperity continues. The numbers don't lie. Egypt's treasury is overflowing. Trade routes that had been neglected for decades are active again. The copper mines in Sinai are producing, gold is flowing from Nubia. Luxury goods from across the Mediterranean and down into Africa are moving through Egyptian markets. Hatshepsut has turned Egypt into the ancient world's trading hub. Military conquest brings temporary wealth, but steady trade that builds lasting prosperity. She figured this out centuries before anyone else. Her diplomatic skills are legendary. Instead of threatening neighbouring kingdoms, she's making deals with them. Trade agreements, mutual defence pacts, cultural exchanges. The Hittites respect her. The Mitannians want to negotiate. Even the sea peoples along the coast prefer dealing with Hatshepsut to fighting Egyptian armies. She's proving that a pharaoh's greatest weapon might not be a sword, it might be the ability to find common ground and mutual benefit. But this delicate balance with Thutmose III requires constant management. She gives him military commands that matter, but never enough independence to build his own power base. He gets credit for successful campaigns, but she controls the treasury and the spoils. He appears beside her in official ceremonies, but always slightly behind, always clearly secondary. For 22 years, this arrangement holds, but you can see the strain, the tension building just beneath the surface. By the later years of her reign, the signs are there if you know where to look. Thutmose III's military exercises are getting more elaborate. His supporters in the army are more vocal. The old noble families who never fully accepted a female pharaoh are starting to whisper again, not openly, nothing treasonous. But the political landscape is shifting. Hatshepsut can feel it. She's not stupid. She knows this golden age has made her powerful, but it's also made her enemies patient. Still, at the height of her power, Hatshepsut has achieved something unprecedented. She's proven that a woman can rule Egypt as effectively as any man. She's brought 2 decades of peace and prosperity. She's created architectural wonders that will last millennia. She's expanded Egypt's influence through diplomacy and trade rather than conquest. But she also knows that success makes enemies, and some enemies are very good at waiting for the right moment to strike. Chapter 11. A Christmas veil lifts. The disappearance of Hatshepsut. Picture this: 1458 BC, after 22 years of rule, after building temples that kissed the sky, after proving women could hold absolute power, Hatshepsut just vanishes. No dramatic death scene, no final battle, no grand funeral we can trace. One day she's pharaoh of the most powerful nation on earth. Next, silence. Her name stops appearing in official records, her voice goes quiet, and Christmas bells seem to toll across the centuries for what we lost. 50-something years old, still sharp, still capable, but her body was probably failing. Ancient Egypt was brutal on everyone, even pharaohs who lived in luxury. Disease, infection, maybe cancer, we'll never know exactly. What we do know, she disappears from the historical record like morning mist. One moment she's issuing decrees, making decisions, running an empire. The next moment, Thutmose III is suddenly ruling alone. No announcement, no ceremony, no explanation, just gone. As if she never existed at all. That's how it starts. Her final inscriptions show a woman still very much in control. Still building, still planning for the future. She's commissioning obelisks, approving temple renovations, managing trade routes. Then around regnal year 22, nothing. Did she die peacefully in her palace? Did illness take her slowly, or was it sudden? The records don't say because someone made sure they wouldn't say. But here's what gets me. She probably died thinking her legacy was secure, thinking her temples would preserve her memory forever. She had no idea what was coming. Natural death makes the most sense. She's in her 50s, which was old for ancient Egypt. Life expectancy was maybe 35 if you were lucky. She'd beaten those odds spectacularly, but time catches everyone. No evidence of violence. No signs of palace coup. Most likely scenario, she got sick, weakened over months, maybe years. Her inner circle kept it quiet. When she finally died, they buried her with royal honours before Thutmose III took sole power, before everything changed, before the systematic destruction began. She died as pharaoh. That matters. Imagine being in that palace when word spread. The female pharaoh is dead. After 22 years of unprecedented rule, the experiment is over. Some probably felt relief. Finally, natural order restored. Others felt terror. What happens to those who supported her? Senmut, her closest advisor, architect of her greatest buildings, he vanishes too. Coincidence? Doubtful. The old guard who helped her seize power suddenly find themselves on the wrong side of history. Power shifts happen fast in palaces. One day you're indispensable, next day, dangerous. Thutmose III had been waiting his whole adult life for this moment. Co-pharaoh in name only, while she held real power. Military commander while she made the big decisions. Now, finally, he's sole ruler of Egypt. And here's the thing. He was actually brilliant at it. Became one of Egypt's greatest warrior pharaohs. Expanded the empire, won massive battles, built his own monuments. But for years, decades even, he left her monuments alone, left her name intact. Why? Maybe he respected what she'd accomplished. Maybe he was too busy conquering to care about revisionist history. The void she left was massive. She'd been the steady hand for over 2 decades, the one making trade deals, commissioning buildings, managing the bureaucracy that kept Egypt running. Suddenly that institutional knowledge, that network of relationships, that careful balance, gone. Thutmose III had to figure out how to be pharaoh, not co-pharaoh, how to rule without her guidance. And you know what? He succeeded brilliantly, which makes what happened later even more puzzling. Why destroy the legacy of someone who'd essentially trained you to rule? Why erase your teacher? Egypt under sole Thutmose III rule looked different. More military campaigns, more conquest, less focus on internal development, more on external expansion. He was everything she wasn't: aggressive, expansionist, traditionally masculine in his approach to power. Where she'd built trade relationships, he built military dominance. Where she'd focused on monumental architecture, he focused on territorial gains. Different styles, both successful, but his approach was more acceptable, more in line with what people expected from pharaohs. No one questioned a warrior king's legitimacy, ever. For years after her death, nothing happened to her monuments. Her obelisks stood tall. Her temples functioned normally. Her images remained untouched. Priests still mentioned her name in ceremonies. But something was shifting beneath the surface. Maybe it started with whispers. Was her rule really legitimate? Did she damage royal traditions? As time passed, as memories of her competence faded, the questions grew louder. Female pharaohs started sounding less like historical fact, more like historical mistake. And mistakes, well, those needed correcting, erasing. The process began slowly, then accelerated. What followed was systematic destruction on a scale that's honestly breathtaking. Not random vandalism, organized, methodical erasure. Teams of workers with chisels and hammers methodically removing her arches from temple walls, smashing her statues, walling up her obelisks so no one could see them, scratching out her name from king lists. This wasn't emotional destruction. This was bureaucratic annihilation. Someone was paying good money to erase 22 years of history, to make it as if the most successful female pharaoh had never existed, and they almost succeeded. Think about what was lost in that erasure. Not just her name, but her innovations, her diplomatic achievements, her architectural vision, the precedent she'd set for future women, her approach to leadership, governing through consensus and trade, rather than war and intimidation. All of it deliberately destroyed because it threatened the natural order, because successful women in power made people uncomfortable, because her very existence proved female pharaohs could work, and that was dangerous knowledge. Better to pretend it never happened. Better to rewrite history than admit they'd been wrong. For 3,000 years, the erasure worked almost perfectly. Hatshepsut became a footnote. If that, a mysterious regent who'd briefly served between two Thutmose pharaohs. Her magnificent temple at el-Bahari, attributed to male pharaohs. Her obelisks, anonymous monuments. Her trade expeditions, someone else's achievements. Generations of Egyptologists walked past her, defaced statues without knowing who they'd originally depicted. The most successful female ruler in ancient history had been turned into a ghost, a whisper, a name found occasionally on pottery shards, unexplained and seemingly unimportant. The implications are staggering when you really think about it. Power structures so threatened by successful women that they'll spend decades erasing all evidence of female competence. Historical revisionism as a tool of patriarchy. The deliberate creation of a world where female leadership seems impossible because all examples have been systematically destroyed. How many other accomplished women disappeared from history this way? How many female voices were silenced by chisels and hammers? Hatshepsut's erasure wasn't unique, it was standard practice, and it worked. For millennia it worked. So when those Christmas bells toll melancholy, they're mourning more than just one woman's death. They're mourning the systematic destruction of female achievement, the erasure of precedent, the lost possibilities. But here's what her destroyers couldn't have imagined. Modern archaeology would piece her story back together. Fragment by fragment, cartouche by cartouche, their careful erasure became the very thing that made her fascinating to future generations. They tried to make her disappear. Instead, they guaranteed she'd be remembered forever. Sometimes the best revenge is simply existing, being rediscovered, being celebrated, being impossible to erase completely. Chapter 12. Nightfall over Legacy. The erasure of Hatshepsut's reign. Picture this. You're walking through Karnak Temple around 1425 BC. Thutmose III has been sole pharaoh for 30 years now. His reign, legendary. Military victories stacked like cordwood. But something's happening in the shadows. Workers arrive at dawn with chisels. They're not building, they're destroying, systematically, methodically, every image of someone who shouldn't exist. Someone whose very memory threatens the natural order of things. The female pharaoh who dared. It wasn't immediate rage. That's what makes this so chilling. Hatshepsut died in 1458 BC. Thutmose III ruled alone for decades, without touching her monuments. Why wait? Why let her temples stand, her obelisks tower, her achievements speak for themselves? Then something shifted. Maybe political pressure, maybe the need to secure his son's succession, maybe just time to realize what she represented. A crack in the foundation of everything they believed about power. The erasure follows a pattern. Clinical, deliberate. They don't destroy her temples, that would be too obvious. Instead, they chisel off every royal cartouche bearing her name, every relief showing her in Pharaoh's regalia, every inscription calling her king. It's surgical removal of memory, like performing an operation on history itself. Remove the patient, leave no scar, no evidence she was ever there. Just emptiness where greatness once stood proudly in stone. Walk through Deir el-Bahari today. Her masterpiece, those terraced temples carved into the cliff face. They're beautiful, breathtaking, but look closer. Every relief of Hatshepsut has been hacked away, chiselled down to rough stone. Her face, gone. Her cartouches, scraped off. Her divine scenes with Amun-Ra, obliterated. It's like someone tried to perform surgery on the very concept of her existence, and almost succeeded. The silence where her image should be, it's deafening. They walled up her obelisks at Karnak. Imagine that level of determination. These weren't small monuments. We're talking 100-foot granite towers weighing 300 tons each. Covered in her achievements, her expeditions to Punt, her building projects, her divine legitimacy, so they built walls around them, stone boxes, turned her triumph into a tomb. For 1,500 years, those obelisks stood hidden, buried alive, her voice calling from behind stone walls that nobody could hear. Senenmut got it worse. Her closest advisor, possibly her lover, definitely her most trusted ally. They found his tomb beneath her temple, and it's been systematically vandalized. His name scratched out, his images defaced, his mummy missing. They didn't just erase him from official records. They tried to murder his soul. In ancient Egyptian belief, that's the ultimate death. No name, no image, no ka to carry you into eternity. Just nothing. Forever. The strangest part? They replaced her. Not with empty space, with Thutmose I or Thutmose III. Imagine the craftsman, hired to go back into temples built decades earlier and reshape history. Take Hatshepsut's achievements and literally carve someone else's name over them. Her trade expeditions become his. Her building projects become his. Her divine legitimacy becomes his. It's identity theft on a cosmic scale. Stealing not just credit, but existence itself. They broke her statues. Not toppled, broke, into specific pieces. Head from body, arms from torso, like they understood Egyptian beliefs about wholeness. A broken image means a broken car. A fragmented statue means a fragmented soul. Archaeologists found hundreds of these pieces buried in pits around her temples, dumped like garbage. 22 years of successful rule reduced to limestone fragments in ancient trash heaps. The violence of it takes your breath away. Think about the psychological warfare here. This wasn't just about Hatshepsut. It was about every woman who might look at her legacy and think, maybe I could rule too. Maybe I could hold real power. Maybe the natural order isn't so natural after all. So they erased her. Not killed her, that was already done. But murdered her memory, made it like she never existed. A 22-year gap in Egyptian history where somehow the kingdom just ran itself. The bureaucrats helped. Had to. You can't erase someone this thoroughly without institutional support. Royal scribes went through papyrus records. King lists got revised. Official histories got rewritten. Temple priests stopped mentioning her name in daily rituals. It was a coordinated campaign across the entire kingdom, like Stalin editing people out of photographs, but with chisels and stone. 3,000 years before Photoshop, they were already perfecting the art of making inconvenient people disappear. It almost worked. For 3 millennia, Hatshepsut was just gone. A whisper in incomplete king lists. A gap in the archaeological record. Tourists walked through her temples without knowing who built them. Scholars studied her reign without knowing she existed. The greatest female pharaoh in Egyptian history, forgotten, erased, relegated to footnotes and question marks. Her name survived only in hidden corners they missed. Cracks in the erasure where memory leaked through like water through stone. But here's what they couldn't destroy. The empty spaces, the violence of the chiseling, the awkward proportions where they carved new names over old ones. The masonry that doesn't quite match where they walled up her obelisks. Evidence of the cover-up became evidence of the crime. Every defaced relief screaming that something important once stood here. Someone significant once existed here. The very act of erasure preserved her. Negative space telling a positive story about systematic, deliberate fear. Christmas Eve, 1903. British archaeologist Howard Carter stands in a vandalized tomb. KV-20. Royal burial ground. Everything's been smashed, looted, defaced, but there, carved into a broken canopic jar, a cartouche they missed. Hatshepsut. The name hits like lightning. This isn't just grave robbing. This is something bigger. Someone tried to erase a pharaoh from existence. Someone succeeded for 3,000 years. But stone remembers. Stone keeps secrets. And slowly, very slowly, she starts coming back. The irony's perfect. They tried to make her disappear because she threatened the natural order. Proved a woman could rule as well as any man. Build greater temples. Launch more successful expeditions. Maintain peace and prosperity for 22 years. So they erased her. Made it like she never existed. But in trying to hide her, they created the greatest archaeological mystery in Egyptian history. Made her more famous in death than she ever was in life. Sometimes the cover-up becomes the story. Chapter 13. Unwrapping the Past. Archaeologists piece together clues. Picture Christmas morning, but stretched across a century. Each shovel of sand, each broken fragment, each hieroglyph barely visible on weathered stone. Another gift, another piece of Hatshepsut. The archaeologists who started digging in the 1800s. They had no idea they were unwrapping one of history's greatest mysteries. A woman so thoroughly erased that finding her again would take generations of patient detective work, and every discovery just made the puzzle more fascinating. The challenge was insane. Imagine trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle when someone's thrown away half the pieces and deliberately damaged the rest. That's what these early archaeologists faced. Hieroglyphs chiseled off walls, statues smashed into fragments, cartouches scraped away so thoroughly you could barely tell there'd been writing there at all. But here's the thing about archaeologists. They're stubborn, obsessively, beautifully stubborn. They see a chip of painted limestone and think, there's a story here. Let's find it. 1903. Howard Carter's working the Valley of the Kings. Not famous yet, Tut still 20 years away. He finds something weird, broken statues, female features, but also a false beard? Royal regalia? Wait, this is confusing. Egyptian queens wore different crowns, different poses. These fragments show a woman dressed like a pharaoh. Actually, not dressed like one, carved like one, depicted like one, as if she actually was one. Carter's looking at these pieces thinking, this doesn't match anything we know about Egyptian royal women. Then the real gifts started showing up. Fragments with hieroglyphs still visible. Names starting to emerge from the damaged stone. Hatshepsut, beautiful name, means foremost of noble women. But here's what blew their minds. The pronouns kept changing, mid-inscription. Same cartouche, same person, but suddenly the hieroglyphs switch from she to he, from feminine endings to masculine ones. Like someone started the inscription talking about a queen, then changed their mind halfway through, and decided to call her a king instead. Each excavation season brought more pieces. Ostraka, those little pottery shards ancient Egyptians used like scratch paper. Bills, lists, casual mentions of daily life during her reign. In the 15th year of Matkar Hatshepsut, wait, 15th year, you don't count regnal years unless someone's actually ruling, not just married to the pharaoh, not just regent for some kid, actually in charge. These scraps of pottery were proving that this woman had ruled Egypt for at least 15 years, maybe longer. The evidence of erasure was everywhere, once they knew what to look for. Temples where her image had been carefully chiselled out and replaced with Thutmose III. obelisks walled up so no one could see her name. But here's what's brilliant about ancient stonework. It's really hard to erase completely. Tool marks in different directions, fresh cut stone against weathered surfaces. The archaeologists could see exactly where later pharaohs had tried to write her out of history. And sometimes they missed spots. Her name survived in corners, high up where the erasers couldn't reach. 1894. French archaeologists working at Deir el-Bahari. They found something incredible. A mortuary temple cut right into the cliff face. 3 terraces rising toward the rock. Colonnades, gardens, sophisticated engineering. But who built it? The inscriptions are damaged, but pieces remain. This isn't just beautiful architecture. It's propaganda. Every relief, every column, every garden terrace making the same argument. Whoever built this belonged here, deserved to rule, had the gods' approval. This temple is a 22-year political campaign carved in stone. More pieces, records of trade expeditions, tribute lists, army payrolls, all dating to Hatshepsut's reign. And here's what the archaeologist realised. This woman wasn't some temporary placeholder. She was running the country, complex foreign policy with Nubia, trade missions to Punt that brought back myrrh trees and exotic animals, major construction projects from Karnak to Aswan. The administrative records show a pharaoh fully in control of Egypt's government, economy, and military for over 2 decades. This wasn't a regent holding power temporarily. This was a pharaoh. But the most fascinating fragments, personal items, a limestone relief showing her in intimate conversation with her architect, Senenmut. Their body language, there's something there. Affection. Maybe more. His tomb's hidden directly beneath her temple. Think about that placement. Unprecedented intimacy for a pharaoh and advisor. Archaeological evidence of a relationship that bent every rule of royal protocol. These fragments weren't just revealing a political story. They were uncovering a love story that had been buried with everything else. Someone who understood her completely, supported her impossible ambitions. Early 20th century. New excavation techniques. Photography. Better documentation. Archaeologists started mapping exactly where they found each fragment. Patterns emerged. Her images weren't randomly destroyed. There was a system, a deliberate campaign, but not immediate. The tool marks showed this happened decades after her death. Someone waited, planned, made sure Thutmose III was secure on the throne before starting the erasure. This wasn't rage, this was calculated political revision. Removing the precedent of a successful female pharaoh from Egyptian history, forever. 1927. The Metropolitan Museum expedition makes a breakthrough. They've found her sarcophagus. Empty, obviously, tomb robbers got there first. But the inscriptions are intact, and they tell an incredible story. Divine birth. The god Amun-Ra choosing her as pharaoh while she was still in her mother's womb. Political mythology, sure, but brilliant political mythology. She's not just claiming the throne, she's claiming the gods themselves designated her to rule. Better legitimacy than any man could offer. The archaeologists were reading ancient feminist propaganda 3,000 years after it was written. Each decade brought more sophisticated techniques, chemical analysis of pigments, carbon dating of organic materials, computer imaging that could reconstruct damaged reliefs. The 20th century was slowly bringing Hatshepsut back from the dead, fragment by fragment, pixel by pixel, her face emerging from damaged stone, her achievements reconstructed from scattered evidence, her story told by people who'd never meet her but felt like they knew her. Archaeologists working across generations, passing down obsessions like family heirlooms, each one adding pieces to her puzzle. 2007. Modern technology changes everything. DNA analysis, CT scans, ground-penetrating radar. Dr. Zahi Hawass identifies her actual mummy, not in her royal tomb, but hidden in a modest burial, probably moved there by someone who wanted to protect her body from the same systematic destruction that erased her images. Even in death, people loved her enough to keep her safe. 3,000 years of hiding her legacy, 60 years of archaeologists unwrapping that erasure, technology finally giving her back her name, her face, her rightful place in history. That's the gift these archaeologists gave us. Patient detective work across more than a century, each fragment a Christmas present, each discovery revealing more of an extraordinary woman who refused to accept limitations, who ruled brilliantly for 22 years, who built monuments that still take your breath away, who loved and was loved, who was systematically erased, and then systematically recovered, by people who understood that some stories are too important to stay buried, some legacies too powerful to destroy completely. The truth always finds a way back to the surface. Chapter 14. Identity Confirmed. Hatshepsut's Christmas Mummy, June 2007. Dr. Zahi Hawass stands in a storage room in Cairo's Egyptian Museum. Behind him, wooden boxes filled with ancient remains. Somewhere in this room lies Egypt's greatest female pharaoh. 3,000 years after someone tried to erase her from history, they're about to prove she existed. This isn't just archaeology anymore. This is resurrection, and it's about to become the most important Christmas present archaeology has ever unwrapped. The mummy they're looking for isn't in some grand royal tomb. She's been hiding in KV60, a modest little chamber discovered way back in 1903. 2 female mummies inside, one clearly a royal wet nurse named Cyprienne, the other unknown woman. Unwrapped, lying there for over a century, while archaeologists chased bigger discoveries. Nobody gave her a second thought. But here's what's wild. The greatest pharaoh in Egyptian history was hiding in plain sight this whole time. Think about this for a second. Hatshepsut ruled an empire, built temples that still stand today, sent ships to the ends of the known world, had her image carved into stone monuments across Egypt, and she ends up in a tomb barely worthy of a minor official. Not the grand burial she planned in the Valley of the Kings, not surrounded by golden treasures, just forgotten, stuffed in a corner with someone's old wet nurse. The irony is almost too much to handle. Dr. Hawass isn't working alone on this. He's got a whole team, CT scanners, DNA analysis, the works. But the breakthrough moment? It comes down to something surprisingly simple, a tooth. Back in the 1960s, archaeologists found Hatshepsut's canopic jar, the one that held her liver. Inside that jar, a single molar. Now they need to match that tooth to one of these mummies. Ancient dentistry is about to solve a 3,000-year-old mystery. The CT scans reveal something incredible. The unknown woman is missing a molar, upper left jaw, the exact spot where Hatshepsut's tooth would fit. They slide it into place, perfect match. The gap in her mouth lines up exactly with the tooth from her canopic jar. After 3 millennia of hiding, of being erased, of being forgotten, Egypt's greatest female pharaoh just identified herself through her own dental records. Even in death, she's still solving problems. There's more evidence piling up. The mummy shows signs of diabetes, bone cancer, arthritis, a woman in her 50s who carried a lot of weight and suffered from multiple health problems. This matches everything we know about Hatshepsut's later years. The CT scans show wear patterns consistent with someone who lived a life of stress and power. Even her bones tell the story of ruling an empire. Her skeleton is a biography written in calcium and cartilage. But here's what gets me about this discovery. It's happening in December 2007, right before Christmas. After spending years hunting through storage rooms and forgotten tombs, they finally identify her just as the world is celebrating, well, someone else's birth entirely. The timing feels almost intentional. Like history decided to give archaeology the ultimate Christmas present. The return of a pharaoh who was supposed to stay lost forever. Talk about perfect timing. The announcement rocks the archaeological world. Front page of every major newspaper, CNN, BBC, all the networks pick it up. For the first time in 3,000 years, Hatshepsut's name is being spoken out loud across the globe. The woman who was supposed to be forgotten, she's trending. Ancient Egypt's most successful female pharaoh is suddenly more famous than most living celebrities. Social media didn't exist yet, but if it had, she would have broken the internet. Now we can put a face to the legend. Reconstruction specialists get to work on her skull. What emerges is fascinating, not the idealized beauty from temple walls. This is a real woman, middle-aged, strong jawline, evidence of dental problems, slightly overweight, the face of someone who carried the weight of an empire on her shoulders for over 2 decades. This isn't a goddess carved in stone. This is Hatshepsut, as she actually lived and breathed and ruled. The discovery changes everything about how we see her story. For over a century, she was just fragments, broken statues, defaced reliefs, names chiseled out of cartouches. Easy to think of her as mythology, but this mummy, this is proof, undeniable physical evidence that she existed, that she was real, that someone actually tried so hard to erase a woman from history that they nearly succeeded, until a Christmas miracle in 2007 brought her back to life. There's something poetic about finding her in such a humble place. The pharaoh who built the most beautiful temple complex in Egypt, discovered in a storage closet basically. The woman who erected the tallest obelisks in the world, hiding in an unmarked box. It's like the universe was playing the longest game of hide and seek in human history. And she won. She stayed hidden until the world was ready to hear her story properly. But even with this incredible discovery, mysteries remain. How did she die? Was it natural causes or something more sinister? Why was she moved to such a modest tomb? Who made that decision? Her mummy shows signs of being rewrapped multiple times. Someone was taking care of her remains even after her official death, moving her, protecting her, making sure she survived even when her memory was supposed to die. Someone loved her enough to keep her safe. The 2007 identification creates a perfect circle. Hatshepsut spent her life trying to secure her legacy, building monuments that would last forever, carving her name in stone, creating temples that would tell her story to future generations. Then someone tried to erase all of that, nearly succeeded too, but in the end her own body became the monument that couldn't be destroyed. Her bones became the autobiography that no one could edit or censor or chisel away. So here we are, the female pharaoh who was supposed to disappear forever. She's back. Her mummy rests in Cairo now, properly identified and honoured. Visitors can see her face, touch the glass case that holds the woman who once ruled the greatest empire on earth. 3,000 years later, Hatshepsut finally gets the recognition she deserved. The ultimate victory over those who tried to erase her. Death couldn't silence her. History couldn't forget her. And Christmas 2007 brought her home. Chapter 15. A Legacy Unveiled. Hatshepsut and the Power of Persistence. Christmas night, 2024. Somewhere, snow's falling. Maybe you're listening to this under warm blankets. Maybe by a dying fire. And here we are, at the end of Hatshepsut's story. 22 years of rule, decades of erasure, centuries of silence, then archaeologists with brushes and patience, piecing her back together, fragment by fragment. Tonight feels right for this ending, because her story, it's about what survives when everything else gets torn down. Think about what we've learned. A 5-year-old girl watching her father's court, knowing she's smarter than the men who will inherit power she never can. A teenager marrying her half-brother because that's how succession works. A young woman watching her weak husband fumble decisions she could make in her sleep. Then that moment, that incredible moment when she stops pretending, when she puts on the false beard and declares herself Pharaoh. The audacity of it still gives me chills. She ruled for over 2 decades, built temples that still stand 4,000 years later, sent trade expeditions to lands so exotic they seemed mythical, kept Egypt prosperous and peaceful, while other pharaohs were off conquering and dying in pointless wars. By any measure, she was extraordinary. But here's what gets me. None of that mattered to the men who came after. Her success was the problem, because if Hatshepsut could rule that well, what did that say about male pharaohs? So they tried to erase her. Not immediately. Thutmose III waited. Maybe out of respect, maybe because he was busy becoming a great military leader himself. But eventually, the hammers came out. Her cartouches were chiselled off monuments. Her statues were smashed. Her obelisks were walled up so no one could see her name. They even moved her mummy to a servant's tomb. For 3,000 years, it worked. Hatshepsut became a ghost, haunting the edges of Egyptian history. But here's the thing about trying to erase someone that thoroughly, you have to be perfect. Miss one fragment, one hidden inscription, one statue head buried in the sand, and the whole project falls apart. That's what happened. Victorian archaeologists started finding pieces. A relief here showing a female pharaoh, a cartouche there with unfamiliar hieroglyphs. Wait, this pharaoh is wearing a beard, but the body underneath is clearly female. What the hell is going on? Slowly, like developing a photograph, Hatshepsut emerged from the darkness. Each archaeological dig revealed more. Her mortuary temple at el-Bahari, carved into the cliff tops, still magnificent even with her images defaced. Her obelisks at Karnak, tallest ever erected, still standing proud. The Punt expedition reliefs, showing exotic trees and strange animals from the edge of the known world. Piece by piece, they reconstructed not just a pharaoh, but one of history's most successful rulers. And Senenmut, her architect, advisor, possibly lover? They found his tomb hidden directly beneath her temple. Think about the symbolism there. In death as in life, he wanted to be close to her, the man who rose from humble origins to become the most powerful person in Egypt besides the pharaoh herself. Their relationship scandalous by ancient standards, touching by modern ones. Two brilliant people finding each other across the rigid hierarchies of the ancient world. In 2007, they finally found her mummy. Not in her beautiful tomb in the Valley of the Kings, but in a modest grave meant for her wet nurse. Even in death, they tried to diminish her, but DNA doesn't lie. This was Hatshepsut, a woman in her 50s, probably diabetic, possibly dying of cancer. Mortal after all, despite the divine mythology she crafted around herself. But what a life she lived before mortality caught up with her. Christmas night seems perfect for thinking about her legacy. Because isn't Christmas about impossible things becoming possible? A stable birth changing the world. Hope surviving in the darkest places. Hatshepsut's story has that same quality. A woman seizing absolute power in a world that said she couldn't. Ruling wisely for decades in a system designed to exclude her. Leaving monuments so magnificent that even systematic destruction couldn't completely erase them. She proved something that threatened the entire social order, that gender was irrelevant to leadership, that a woman could build temples, negotiate trade deals, maintain peace, and inspire loyalty just as well as any man. Maybe better. That's why they tried so hard to erase her. Not because she failed as a pharaoh, but because she succeeded so completely. Her competence was dangerous. Her legacy was a threat to every man who claimed power by birth, rather than ability. But here we are, 4,000 years later, talking about her. The erasure failed. Her temples still stand. Her obelisks still pierce the Egyptian sky. Tourists from around the world visit Deir el-Bahari and marvel at what she built. Museums display her artifacts. Archaeologists keep uncovering new evidence of her reign. The men who tried to delete her from history, most people can't even name them, but everyone remembers the female pharaoh with the fake beard. That's the power of persistence. Not just Hatshepsut's persistence in claiming and keeping power, but the persistence of truth itself. You can chisel names off monuments, but you can't chisel away what actually happened. You can smash statues, but you can't smash the impact someone had on the world. You can rewrite official histories, but you can't rewrite the stones and pottery shards and mummy wrappings that archaeologists eventually dig up and piece together. Her story resonates now more than ever. In a world still struggling with gender equality, still questioning whether women can handle power, still trying to erase the achievements of those who don't fit traditional molds. Hatshepsut stands as proof that competence transcends gender, that leadership comes in many forms, that sometimes the most qualified person for the job is the one society says can't have it, and that truth eventually finds a way to survive. So tonight, as we wrap up her story, remember this: Hatshepsut ruled Egypt at its height, built wonders that still inspire awe, maintained peace and prosperity for a generation, and when powerful men tried to erase her legacy, she outlasted them all. That's not just ancient history, that's a Christmas miracle. The persistence of truth, the survival of greatness, the ultimate victory of those who dare to be more than the world says they can be. Sleep well, knowing her story survived to reach you,